Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's Mr. Idaroli here with another presentation. This one on no taxation without representation. This is the second part of a two-part chapter summary sheet review. We're going to start this one with new taxes on the colonies on page 114. As you notice, this is a very short lesson. It only goes from 114 to 115. So let's get right into it. Once again, we're going to be using during reading strategies, making connections, interacting with text, and clarifying understanding. I went into greater detail with these in the last presentation, so I think just a quick overview of these during reading strategies is important. We also went over the reading guides for one of these readings to really reinforce the importance of doing this when you read, making those connections, interacting with text, and clarifying understanding by using the actual captions in the text to help you understand what the reading is all about. And having good during reading strategies guarantees that you'll have good after reading strategies where we can recall, respond, and evaluate. And once again, we're recalling here by completing our chapter summary sheet. And certainly you'll have to respond to questions on the upcoming assessment. And we will evaluate with this one with the proclamation of 1763. Take that back. And we'll take a look at that document. You'll get a chance to evaluate using this material. Okay, so hey, let's move into it and get right there. Let's keep in mind our summarizing with rules-based skills, right? We're going to effectively summarize by doing the following. Delete some information, substitute information, change things around and make it easier to understand, and keep the most important information. And again, I'm not going to spend a long time on this slide because we really went over this well on the last presentation. We're doing this with the chapter summary sheet format right now. Do keep in mind in the next unit, we're going to move on and learn how to outline. It's a different type of summary format. Some people like it better than the chapter summary sheet. I think it depends upon your certain preference. Certainly by the end of the year, I might give you a choice to pick one or the other, but we will learn the outlining format in the next section. So let's jump right into this. I am on page 114. It's new taxes on the colonies. We have that first paragraph, a very short paragraph, and that's the intro, and that's why I called it that. So right into it, in 1765, Parliament passed the Stamp Act. This law taxed almost all printed materials. Newspapers, wills, and even playing cards needed a stamp to show that the tax had been paid. Okay, very short paragraph, so we know we're not going to have too much here to summarize. Looking at it, the year 1765, Parliament passed Stamp Act, tax on all printed materials. I might mention some newspapers, wills, right? Stamp showed tax paid, maybe something along those lines. Let's see what I got, and I did it all in one bullet, right? Parliament, which I shortened down to Parlia, passed Stamp Act, tax on all printed goods. Again, I listed a couple, newspapers, wills, playing cards. All need special stamp, show tax paid, boom. And I give an example of what that looked like there as well. So, hey, that's a pretty easy summary, and that's all that's required right there. The next part is probably the harder part with the opposition to the Stamp Act. It's probably the longest section in this reading to summarize, and in general, it's also very short. So if you need to take a minute and write this down, feel free to pause the video. Otherwise, we'll move on to opposition to the Stamp Act. Opposition to the Stamp Act. Bottom page 114, and this will go to the top of 115. The Stamp Act outraged the colonists. They argued that only their own assemblies could tax them. Patrick Henry, a member of the Virginia House of Burgesses, got the Burgesses to take action. The Assembly passed a resolution, a formal expression of opinion, declaring that it had the only and sole exclusive right and power to lay taxes on its citizens. So there's the paragraph right there. Okay, Stamp Act outraged colonists. Only assemblies could tax. Patrick Henry, House of Burgesses, right, passed resolution. Only they could pass taxes. I mean, if I have something like that in my summary, probably did this in about 2 or 3 bullets. Got a nice little picture of Patrick Henry there at the bottom. Collins outraged, said only assemblies could tax them. Patrick Henry, member of House of Berg, I shortened Burgesses to Berg, to Berg, took action. I think that's all I had. I kept this rather short, and I was able to at this paragraph. Oh, I had one more. Pass resolution, opinion. only they could pass taxes. So I did this one in just two simple bullets. So again, it's not a real long paragraph, so very easy to do. And that's all I had for this paragraph. And remember, we do this paragraph by paragraph. The next paragraph is even shorter. In Boston, Samuel Adams helped start the Sons of Liberty. Its members took to the streets to protest the Stamp Act. Protesters burned effigies, stuffed figures, made to look like unpopular tax collectors. I can't imagine I had too much here for this one. I mean, certainly I'm going to mention Boston, Sam Adams, Sons of Liberty, protested, burned effigies, stuffed figures. I'm thinking I have at least something like that. And I did do this one in two bullets as well. Boston, Sam Adams, Sons of Liberty, protest Stamp Act in streets, burned effigies, stuffed figures, look like tax collectors. Kept it rather simple. This is a really short paragraph. I didn't have much here. So paragraph 1 and 2 of 4 paragraphs are already done. And once again, if you feel the need to stop and review and check your notes, feel free to do that. This is the time to do that. I try to offer some commentary as we go on here, and you'll note that in the last section we really talked about the Sugar Act and how people felt really exploited or really not or violated, which is the term the book uses, okay, by these laws, because of no taxation without representation. And I don't know if you're noticing something here. This is being made very clear now by Patrick Henry and Sam Adams, that really it is not in the power of Parliament to pass taxes on the colonies. The colonies had always felt, and this is why we studied the early history of the colonies. In the early history of the colonies, the local assemblies passed the taxes. Well, notice that Parliament is not even considering the local assemblies. It sees itself as the major power. The word is supersede. They're going over these colonial assemblies and saying, no, you don't have the right. We have the right to pass taxes. We have control over you. And the colonies are, of course, resisting this and saying, no, a long time ago, you gave us the right to pass our own taxes. You should be asking us. So it is no taxation without representation. But it's also, and let's simplify a little bit, it's also a power struggle between the colonial governments and Parliament. Remember, the colonial governments have no positions in Parliament. There are no colonists that serve in Parliament in London, in England. So this is a major issue. This is the lack of representation in London. There's no representation there. So that's why you see this big fight. So before we continue on, I want to make that pretty clear so you understand what's going on here. Let's move on to the next 2 paragraphs in opposition to the Stamp Act. So colonial leaders decided to work together. Aha, right? In October, delegates from 9 colonies met in New York at the Stamp Act Congress. They sent a statement to the king and parliament declaring that only colonial assemblies could tax the colonists. Holy cow, there we go. Right? So this is finally starting to come up. So what did I get out of paragraph 3? Right? What's important here? Colonial leaders worked together. Delegates, nine colonies met. New York Stamp Act Congress. Notice how we simplified some of the things. And remember, when you take notes, you can use numbers, you can use abbreviations, you can use hyphens, which I do here. Stated the king, parliament, only colonial assemblies could pass taxes. Just what we said a minute ago. So without even looking ahead, I knew this was true. Okay, so again, review your notes. If you need to pause here and review this, do so. Otherwise, I'll move on to the last paragraph here. Last paragraph. People in colonial cities urge merchants to boycott, refuse to buy British goods in protest. As the boycott spread, businesses in Britain lost so much money that they demanded Parliament repeal or cancel the Stamp Act. In March 1766, Parliament repealed the law. However, it also passed the Declaratory Act, stating that it had the right to tax and make decisions for the British colonies in all cases. We'll get to the commentary on that in a minute, but let's look at the actual how I summarize this out. Colonial cities urge boycott, refuse to buy British goods to protest. Basically got that first sentence there. Boycott spread, Brits businesses lose money, demand repeal of Stamp Act. That got me about halfway through the paragraph. March 1766, law repealed, but Parliament passed Declaratory Act. So what is this Declaratory Act saying? Said Parliament had the right to tax, make decisions for the colonies. Now, if you're not looking at that and going, that's a complete slap in the face, you should, because that's exactly how the colonists took the Declaratory Act. It's a complete slap in the face. It's basically saying, okay, we'll back away and we'll repeal these taxes. But guess what? Next time it's us. We make taxes and you're going to eat it. And you can imagine how this went over. I mean, you can imagine. This is definitely just a blatant disregard for the powers that the local assemblies had, and it's Parliament saying that no, we have the power. And of course, the colonial assemblies totally disagree with this. Okay, something to keep in mind. Again, if you need to stop here and review this, please do. Otherwise, we're going to move on. We have two more paragraphs of the Townsend Act, and that wraps up this section. So we're going to move on. The Townsend Acts. Okay. The Stamp Act taught the British that the colonists would resist internal taxes, those paid inside the colonies. As a result, in 1767, Parliament passed the Townsend Acts to tax imported goods, such as glass, tea, and paper. The tax was paid when the goods arrived, before they were brought inside the colonies. That's real interesting, right? So what am I getting out of this paragraph? Stamp Act taught British colonists resist taxes from inside colonies. 1767, Townsend Act, tax imported goods like glass, tea, and paper. Tax on goods before they arrive in colonies, before they're bought. Okay, so the tax is imposed upon the price of the good, kind of invisibly, kind of like secretly put on the good. And it's not paid by the customer directly at the time of purchase. It's if the good costs $10 coming off the ship, they tagged on an extra $1 or $2 for taxes. So it was like $12. It's kind of a secret tax that you're not supposed to see. And the colonists saw right through that one, didn't they? By then, any British taxes angered the colonists. In towns throughout the colonies, women protested by supporting another boycott of British goods. They also urged colonists to wear homemade fabrics rather than buying fabric made in Britain. Some women's groups called themselves the Daughters of Liberty. So, hey, that brings us to the end of this. And hey, what's the big thing here? Any British tax angered the colonists. Protest starts right away. Many colonial towns protest. Women boycotted Brit goods, urged making homemade fabrics instead of buying them from the Brits. Some are called Daughters of Liberty. Now, you notice I did take a lot of notes on these paragraphs, but this is content-rich stuff. I mean, it was hard for me not to write things down because there was so much content built into this very short lesson. So, things to keep in mind. So I believe that brings us to the end here. So we've wrapped things up. Again, if you need to pause, and you might notice we are not leaving this lesson with a solved problem. You can probably tell by looking at this that this is a problem that's going to continue on into the next section, right? Uniting the colonists. Okay, so we are left with conflict up in the air with nothing resolved. I mean, really, you have this resistance to give the colonial assemblies the right to tax. The Parliament is saying they have the right, and you see the colonists themselves are defying the British attempts to tax them. So, things are kind of heating up as we leave this lesson. Things are not cooling off, which, that's what's going to bring us to the American Revolution. Okay. Hey, so with that ends this presentation. I'll see you in the next one, and have a good day.